So what is all this Airbnb stuff really all about? To be fair, I'm an Airbnb or short-term rental owner, but maybe it's for you, maybe it's not. I'd like to show you both sides of actual properties I own so you can figure out if this makes sense for you or maybe it totally doesn't. But let's see all the facts.
If you're new here, my name is Dibugnara, and over the last 20 years, I've been buying real estate and lending money on real estate for all types of properties. But I'm not here to sell you on me. I'm here to tell you how I did it. Over the last few years, I've amassed a short-term or Airbnb portfolio worth over $20 million. With that, it's allowed me to retire younger, replace my income from other ventures with all short-term rental income, and travel all over and even own properties in other countries.
I'm going to examine 3 homes today that I own in 3 different states to give you a fair aspect of what kind of goes on out in there when you buy the home, when you furnish the home, and how you go through it. So let me start with the property that was one of my first Airbnb buys in New Jersey, the state I'm in today. The property is in Seabright, New Jersey, which is a beach town, which is highly populated during the summer, and it has been what I like to call a short-term rental or a vacation area for the last 15 to 20 years. In general, if you're going to buy a property, as I've said before in my previous videos, I believe that you need to buy vacation rentals in towns that have a short-term rental history. You may not get the highest grossing property there because you're not going to find a diamond in the rough, but you'll get something that's consistently got a history. And if you're looking for a safe strategy when buying a short-term rental property, this is the safest one. Properties in vacation areas that have short-term rental histories before Airbnb and VRBO still existed. So this property I have in Seabright, New Jersey meets those requirements. It's a 2-family home. Both units are about 3 bedrooms. This property was a more expensive buy, and my initial investment on this property was somewhere around $200,000. So again, bigger investment. The risky part of this property is that in a northeast state with a beach area, you're only really going to rent between 4 and max 5 months a year. But in this case, I really rent about 4 months a year, from the beginning or middle of May to the middle of really September for warm weather. That leaves a lot of risk, right? Because if I don't make enough rent in those months, then I'm not going to be able to make enough money to even cover the mortgage. Thankfully, in this area, those months are very, very high grossing months. The property is located about a half a block from the beach in a downtown area where there's plenty of restaurants and activities for kids, families to do. And what I've said to you before in these videos, and I'll say again, is you want to buy a house that has multiple income funnels, right? So this house really fits those requirements. And here's what I mean by that. It's a vacation area, which is one. So people are going to come down there to vacation, whether they stay at my home or not. I'm a half a block from the beach, which makes the home desirable because they can go back and forth to the beach. I have restaurants and bars that are walkable, which makes it also desirable. And that even helps me in off-season months, in winter months, so people don't tend to go down there, that they'll go down for the weekend and maybe go out to eat because everything is close and it's kind of easy to function down there, even when it's cold. So it really hits all those points. But again, it's very, very, or highly, highly seasonal, meaning that it has a high season, it has a very, very low season. This property financially, like I said, cost me, with furnishing, about $215,000 to get into. So big investment. As I stated previously, and I'll state to you again, I want to make in profit after my expenses. So I want my net profit to be after all my rental expenses and my mortgage expenses and my cleaning and everything else like that. I want to make 20% on my initial investment I put in. Meaning, if I put $220,000 into this home, it has to make about $40,000 a year for it to make sense for me. The home itself, including mortgage and cleaning and maintenance throughout the year, is going to cost me about $84,000 a year, meaning that I have to make about $124,000 to meet my requirements, right? $128,000. Thankfully, this property does meet those buckets because it does about, on average, between $36,000 and $40,000 a month, June, July, and August. By doing that much revenue in those months, I'm meeting my requirement for the year, which makes this property highly desirable because it's less maintenance because I only have to work with it about 4 months a year. And I'm pretty much meeting my income goal in those 4 months. Between May 15th and September 15th, I will make somewhere between $100,000 and $124,000 without renting it the rest of the year. So everything I rent the rest of the year will be gravy. In beach towns also, sometimes you'll be able to get some short-term winter rentals for 15 to 30 days. So this home was about a $230,000 investment. I will make about $40,000 a year. And my other requirement on these properties is I want to have my total initial investment back between 3 and 5 years. On this property, it's going to be more towards the high end because it was a bigger investment. So it's going to take me somewhere between 4 and 5 years to get my investment back, but it meets all my requirements, right? It's got the monthly income I'm looking to make. So I'm making 20% interest on my initial investment by making a little bit over $40,000 a year. And it gives me my money back between 3 and 5 years. The risk on a property like this is if we go through a rainy summer, or for some reason there's something wrong with the house in the summer months in the Northeast and I can't rent it, I run a big risk of losing my yearly income. So let's say my property had to be vacant for June, whatever the problem was, right? I had to be vacant for June. That could represent between 25 and 30% of my income, and it makes that property go from profitable to maybe just break even. So with these type of properties, there is a higher reward because it's less work because I only have to worry about it a few months a year. It's less maintenance because I only have to worry about it a few months a year. But if I lose rent because of property not being available in those months, I run a huge risk on something like that. So the first property we're examined is a highly seasonal property that has a larger risk because it's so seasonal, but it has a larger return on the money. So that's one. The next property I'm going to go over is a chalet I have in Lake Harmony, Pennsylvania, which is the Poconos. The Poconos is been a vacation area for the last 40 years. So again, meets my initial requirement, right? It's got a short-term rental or vacations for the last 40 years. This property out of pocket was about $150,000 investment for me. So again, a higher investment purposes. So I'm really looking to make about $30,000 a year on this property and or about $2,500 a month in profit. This property is complicated, and I'm going to tell you where my mistake was here. Now, I do think I'll meet my income goals on the property for the year as far as profit, but where I messed up on this property is I bought the property in 2021. The property actually had a short-term rental or Airbnb history like I look for, right? So it's doing all the things that I'm checking all the buckets off. What I didn't realize and what you have to look out for and what you should look for on your next property is the property had a short-term rental history based off of 2020 and 2021 income, right? Had earned a little bit over $100,000 in those years. So in my brain, 60 to 70% of what it had earned already, and I thought I could improve the house, I'd still be a very profitable home. The property is going to cost me about $36,000 a year. So to get to my income goal, I really only have to make about between $60,000 and $70,000 to make what I want from my return on investment and to get my money back in 3 to 5 years. I'm getting there, but I'm working a lot harder for it because I was looking at numbers that didn't historically make sense. 2020 and 2021 were years with very, very high short-term rental income. And in certain areas, like the Poconos, it was even higher because they're mountainous, they're out of the way, you don't have to worry about people, you don't have to worry about restrictions. More people flock there than normal years during COVID. So what I should have been looking at and what you should be looking at in all properties is not just 2020 and 2021 income, if there is that income. The year you should compare your property to most is 2019 for value, for rental income, and for popularity in the area because that was pre-COVID, pre-restrictions. Not only that, it was pre-real estate boom. If you compare your property to 2018, 2019 instead of 2020 and 2021, and this is if you can, you'll get a better realistic view of what the property is going to be worth. So where I messed up on this property was that I was looking at the wrong year when I was looking at income. I was looking at 2020 and 2021, and the income was super high. Now, I believe that I can get the property back there, but what it took for me to get the property into a range where I could make over $100,000 is it took me making improvements to the house. Because now I needed the property to stand out compared to all my competition. So now I had to put more money into the house. So I just set my return on investment back further, and I set my return on my money back further. So it went from a property that could possibly meet my goals to something that's going to take me longer to get my money back now because I made a mistake in buying it. So that's property number 2. The lesson here is do your research, right? Compare your properties pre-COVID and compare the historical data pre-COVID instead of comparing it off of a year that was very, very high. You never want to buy something based off its best year ever. You want to compare it to averages, right? So that's property number 2. Property number 3 is actually one of my first Airbnb buys, and it's probably one of my best buys. The purchase of this property in Ocala, Florida, was $325,000. We call it the Blue House. The Blue House has a pool. Ocala, Florida is kind of horse equine country. There's the World Equestrian Center is there, which is a huge horse center that they built that was, I think, a couple of $1 billion to build. People flock to from all over the country to come to do show horses, jump horses. Everything that's got to do with horses goes on here. So people come there for longer stays. Besides having the horse aspect of it, I'm only about a mile from the historic downtown, which you can take a golf cart to. And I have a pool at the house. So I have 3 kind of additional funnels like I speak to you guys about. This property I bought for only $325,000. My initial investment on this property was only about $70,000 with furnishing. So to make my income goal on this property of 20%, I really only have to make about 14%, $14,000 in profit. So a $70,000 investment, 20%, I got to make about $14,000 in profit on the property, which is only about 11 or 12. It's $1,250 a month, essentially, I have to make, which isn't that bad. The property is only costing me for the year about $24,000 with maintenance and expenses and everything else. So to make what I really have to make, I have to make somewhere between $38,000 and $40,000 in top line income on this property over the year. The property is going to do somewhere between $75,000 and $80,000 this year in top line income. So I'm doubling what I'm making. Instead of 20%, I'm making between 40 and 50% of my money, and I'm going to have my initial investment back in 2 years. That's a great investment, right? So what I found with this is a diamond in the rough, though, and these are harder to find. Ocala, Florida was not a huge area for short-term rentals. What's more unique about my properties in the historical downtown where I bought, pools aren't common. So I found a property that was in an area that was rentable. They have favorable short-term rental laws, that was not expensive, that had unique attractions to it, had a low maintenance cost because of low taxes. So this is an ideal situation. It's harder to find. But I will tell you this, when I found a strategy that worked in this town, I went and bought more homes there because I was able to see a formula that worked. Now, the other homes I own there don't work as well as this property works. It's just a more unique property. But this was a really, really good example of buying a property for all the right reasons. But what I didn't have here, which I preached to you in all the other houses, is I didn't have a history of short-term rentals, really. There were only a couple of short-term rentals in the area. They were doing very, very well, but I didn't have a huge history of short-term rentals. So the risk I took on this property is buying in an area that didn't have a lot of short-term restrictions, but that didn't have a lot of short-term rentals either. So it worked out for me, but it could have gone the other way, right? It could have been an area that there was no real demand for, but if you look for areas that have multiple funnels always, right? So in this case, it was Horse Center. It was historical downtown. It was the property had a pool, and it was in Florida in a nice area that has grown a lot of the year. I was able to make sense of it and make the property work. That's kind of where we are. This was an area that works for me because it was in an area that was a downtown horse area, pool. I have multiple funnels coming in. It ended up being a really, really good area for short-term rentals for me. So those are 3 properties. Those are the 3 real properties where I showed you both sides, right? I showed you the investment. I showed you how much it cost me. I showed you the goods and bads, the risk, what you're going to see with the properties, but I'm giving you real examples so you can make decisions on if Airbnb works for you or not. Now, this isn't everything. This isn't every area in the world, but 3 different states, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Florida, and 3 different scenarios that you could look at to see if you could find something that's similar for you that makes sense. I hope you're getting good information from this. If you want to check out some more of our Airbnb videos, go to our Ralph Dibugnara YouTube channel, ralphdibugnara.com. We have a course called The Next Real Estate Goal Rush that'll teach you all about Airbnbs, but more importantly, look at the videos, like them, comment on it, tell us what you want to see next. I hope you're getting something from it. Thank you so much.